There are moments when something ordinary becomes strangely specific. You see a name in a context that doesn't belong to your current life. It's not attached to a message, a memory, or a conversation. It simply appears. Once you might ignore it. Twice you question it. But when it keeps showing up, in different places, through unrelated situations, you begin to wonder if it's more than chance. You might be doing something simple, checking your phone, walking by a billboard, or hearing someone speak, when a familiar name unexpectedly appears. It doesn't change what's happening around you, but it makes you pause for a moment, just enough to leave a trace. At first you let it go, then it happens again and again. You ignore it, but deep down you feel a small pull, a quiet reminder that it isn't just random. It's not about coincidence anymore. It's about timing, precision, repetition that feels personal. Your body registers it before your mind can form the question. Why this name? Why now? There was one man who understood the power of moments like this, not just intellectually, but deeply. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest psychological thinkers of the modern era, devoted his life to the invisible patterns behind human experience. He studied not just the mind, but the symbols, emotions, and strange repetitions that shape a life. Jung gave us a word for this kind of moment: synchronicity, not coincidence, not accident, but two things coming together in a way that feels emotionally timed, even if they don't seem logically connected. And maybe that's what this is, not a message in the obvious sense, but a pattern, a pull, a thread that keeps weaving itself into your awareness, not with noise, but with familiarity. Because this isn't just a name. It carries something, a moment, a version of you, a feeling that never quite learned how to leave. Some people enter our lives to do more than just pass by. They spark something inside us. Even after they are gone, their name keeps coming back, not to bring them back, but to show you what still matters inside you. Across many cultures and spiritual traditions, there's a recurring idea that the universe communicates through signs, not through dramatic events or obvious messages, but through quiet repetitions of names, numbers, patterns, and moments that seem timed with precision. These signs are rarely clear instructions. They don't shout, they don't force, but they do echo. And the repetition is what makes them feel personal. People interpret these signs in different ways. For some, they offer guidance, a sense of direction when everything else feels uncertain. For others, they feel like reassurance, confirmation that they're still connected to something meaningful, even if the path isn't clear yet. And often they serve as validation, not of an outcome but of an experience, a way of saying, yes, what you felt was real, it mattered, and it's still part of you. The repetition of a name can carry that kind of weight. It's not always about the person behind the name, but about what that name represents inside you, a memory you haven't processed, a desire you haven't fully admitted, a lesson you were meant to integrate but chose to postpone. When these signs appear, they don't demand immediate answers, but they ask you to pay attention. They point to something active, something unresolved, something quietly calling for presence. To ignore them is easy. To pause and reflect on why they keep returning, that's where something shifts. The sign alone doesn't change your life, but how you respond to it might. You don't need to figure out its meaning right away. You don't have to understand it all at once, but you feel it, more like a presence than a memory. It is something unresolved, quietly stirring beneath the surface. And then you realize, when the universe sends you this name, it isn't a random accident. It doesn't push you to act. It doesn't demand you chase after something. It simply points to what is still important. So before you scroll past it or try to ignore that flicker of recognition, take a moment. There is something here worth your attention. It may not be about the person themselves, but about a part of you that still carries meaning. Some names echo long after the person is gone. You don't go looking for them, they find you. And when they do, they are not just reminders, they bring out feelings you thought were buried. This name isn't only connected to a person, it is tied to something inside you, a spark that came alive when that person was part of your life. It might be a feeling you've tried to forget, or a part of you that still needs to be understood. It brings with it not only a memory of that person, but also a reminder of who you were when they were there, whether you felt safe, confused, certain, or doubtful. Even if they are no longer around, that piece of you is still there, living in the space filled by their name. Soon you start to see that it's not just a name. It is like a thread inviting you to look closer, as if the universe is giving you a hint while you've been too busy not to notice. This name, coming up again and again, feels less like a coincidence and more like a sign. In these moments, you are offered more than just a link to the past. You are invited to think about the story you've told yourself about this name, a story built on your experiences, the people you've met, and the emotions you've felt. But what if that story isn't finished yet? What if there is another layer waiting to be discovered? It is not just about the person attached to it, but about the meaning you have given it. This is where the journey of discovery begins, by understanding what the name brings up inside you. What part of your journey is still being shaped by it, even if you haven't noticed? Names are more than labels. They are symbols. They carry meanings beyond just their sound or look. When they show up again and again, it's a gentle reminder to look deeper, ask questions, and pay attention to what might be hidden. The universe isn't forcing anything on you. It's not about creating something out of nothing. It's about revealing the connections that have always been there, even if you overlooked them because they didn't fit in your current story. There are times when something feels too connected, too precise to ignore. The recurring name, whether it appears quickly or more clearly, gradually changes from being a random word to a signal that pulls your attention in a certain direction. At first, it's easy to say, it's just a common name. But deep down, you feel that it is different. This name isn't just any word. Why this name? Why now? What is it trying to tell you? Even though your life has moved on, you've had new experiences, met new people, and built new connections, that name still shows up at unexpected moments. It isn't asking you to go back. It is asking you to notice what is still there inside you, to see why you still react to it, even when it is no longer part of your daily life. There might be a lesson that wasn't learned, or a feeling that hasn't been fully understood. If that name still affects you, there is something inside you that has not been resolved. Let's be clear. This isn't about the person behind the name. It is about the meaning you attach to them, the expectations you once had, and the story you built about what they represented. And most of all, it is about the part of you that let go of something important to keep that story alive. Avoiding the truth always comes with a cost. Sometimes it's a subtle distraction, a sense of disconnection, or just feeling emotionally numb. Other times it shows up as repeating patterns, lingering anger, or getting drawn into similar situations again and again. When you stop blaming others and begin to look at yourself, you learn something important about who you really are. In the end, the name isn't the problem. It is a signal that draws your attention to something unresolved. If hearing that name still causes an emotion, shifts your focus, or brings a physical reaction, then something hasn't been dealt with properly. You might tell yourself it's over. You might say you've moved on. But if that name still touches you, it means there is something waiting to be faced. Many people try to ignore these feelings, pretending they don't matter. But avoiding them doesn't bring you clarity, and staying silent doesn't bring peace. As long as something keeps coming back, it means it hasn't been fully resolved. You don't have to go back to the past or rekindle an old relationship. What you need is to notice the part of you that still reacts and ask why. Why you are still holding on to what that person represented. Maybe this name shows up because you are repeating a behavior you promised yourself you would never repeat. Maybe you are tolerating too much or silencing your own voice to keep things peaceful. Maybe you are living as someone who looks calm on the outside while feeling tension inside. The past doesn't have to return exactly as it was. Sometimes it comes back in the form of familiar feelings, in repeating patterns, in names. So what haven't you faced yet? What have you left unspoken, ignored, or simply accepted without question? This isn't about punishment. It is feedback. The discomfort is information. Until you stop avoiding it, it will keep finding you. In names, in moments, in people who remind you of the truths you haven't dealt with. Your work isn't to forget the past. It is to learn from it, to understand why that name still affects you, and to take responsibility for the parts of yourself you left behind. Not to revisit old chapters or fix what has already happened, but to be honest about what remains. This is your invitation. Take a moment the next time you hear that name. Feel what comes up inside you and wonder why it still matters. The story is still unfolding, and this name is only one part of a much bigger picture. When people speak of signs from the universe, they often expect a clear direction, an open door, a turning point, a confirmation that they're meant to take action. But more often, these signs are reflective. They're not about doing something immediately, they're about noticing, slowing down long enough to realize that your attention is being pulled for a reason. You may be tempted to explain it away, to dismiss it as coincidence, and that's always an option. But sometimes paying attention doesn't mean believing in magic. It just means being honest. Honest that you haven't moved on as fully as you thought. Honest that this name still carries meaning. Honest that you're curious, even if you don't want to admit it. The universe doesn't operate on the timeline of your logic. It works through rhythm, energy, emotion. It brings things forward not when you want them, but when you're finally capable of seeing them differently. That's what makes these signs so disruptive. They don't care if you're ready. They only care if you're listening. There's something important you need to understand about why that name keeps appearing. It's not just random, and it's not necessarily a message you're meant to obey. But it's also not meaningless. The mind doesn't fixate on things without reason, and the universe doesn't keep returning the same signal unless there's still something inside you that hasn't been fully brought into awareness. You don't have to believe in anything mystical to realize that attention has power. The more you focus on something, especially with emotional weight, the more present it becomes in your perception. And when it's a name, tied to someone who once meant something real to you, the energy around that name gets amplified. That's the beginning of manifestation. Not some magical force that gives you what you want when you want it, but the subtle and ongoing alignment between what you focus on and what continues to shape your emotional reality. Every time you revisit the thought, every time the name echoes in your mind or shows up in your environment, you're reinforcing a frequency, not out of weakness, but out of habit, out of attachment, out of something that once made sense and hasn't fully found closure. This is where I want you to slow down. Not to panic or overthink, but to get honest with yourself. If the name is still showing up, what are you hoping it leads to? Are you waiting for a message, a shift, an apology, a second chance? Or maybe, are you holding space for something that no longer exists, but still defines part of how you feel and who you are? None of this means you're doing anything wrong. It just means you haven't chosen what to do with that energy yet, and unclaimed energy always circles back. That's why repetition feels so personal. It's not the universe trying to confuse you. It's the universe asking, do you want to keep feeding this, or is it time to redirect it? Manifestation is not about control. It's about clarity. The clearer you become about what you truly want and why, the more your energy begins to shift in that direction. And so if the name is still showing up, it's possible that you've been manifesting without realizing it. Not because you want them back necessarily, but because some part of you still lives where they once stood. So let's be honest. Is this still about the person, or is it about a version of yourself you miss? A sense of certainty, connection, or even chaos that made you feel alive, even when it hurt. You're allowed to feel all of that. This isn't about denying anything, but it is about deciding what to do with it now. If you keep focusing on the name, it will keep finding its way into your world. Not because the universe is testing you, but because your attention is still open. And the moment you begin to shift that focus, not forcefully, not with guilt, but with awareness, you begin to create a different pattern, one that centers on where you're going instead of where you've been. That's where intention changes everything. Intention is what turns raw emotion into movement. It's what takes a memory and helps you either honor it or release it. And you don't need to announce it to anyone. You don't need a ritual or a sign from above. You just need to choose, gently but firmly, where your energy belongs now. So the next time that name appears, on a screen, in conversation, or in your own mind, don't rush to interpret it. Don't assume it means you're supposed to act. The universe responds to your direction, not just your desire, and you're allowed to choose what stays alive in you. Maybe the name still matters. Maybe it always will. But what matters more now is what you do with it. At some point, the name stops being just a memory. It becomes a question, one that keeps repeating itself in subtle, unexpected moments. You notice it, then wonder if maybe you're supposed to do something, not just feel it, not just think about it, but act. And maybe that's the part you've been resisting. Taking action isn't always about reaching out or restarting something. Sometimes it's about stepping toward clarity. A message that appears more than once might be trying to move you, not necessarily back to a person, but toward understanding what that person still represents in your life. Ignoring it might feel safe, but it often keeps you circling the same questions. And the truth is, until you do something with the weight you carry, it keeps carrying you. There's value in engaging, not impulsively, not recklessly, but with intention. That could mean reaching out, if it feels right and necessary. It could also mean starting a conversation you've been avoiding. Not with them, but with yourself. What is this name still tied to? A decision you never made, a feeling you never spoke out loud, a version of yourself you abandoned. Sometimes we wait for signs to give us permission to feel something again. But when those signs keep showing up, maybe the real permission you need is your own. To open the journal, to ask hard questions, to track when and why this name keeps appearing and what it stirs every single time. Patterns don't just reveal meaning. They help you recognize what part of your life is still emotionally active, even when everything on the surface seems calm. Writing can give shape to what otherwise stays vague. You don't need to be a writer. You just need to be honest. What does this name make you remember? What does it make you question? And most importantly, what does it make you want? Is it connection, closure, a different version of the past, a different future? Reflection gives those questions space to land. And when you see them written in front of you, you begin to realize that maybe it's not about the person at all, Maybe it's about the part of your story you haven't finished writing. Still, reflection alone won't always be enough. At some point, you may have to choose. Do you let the name stay as a thought that circles around, or do you bring it into action? Some form of response, even if it's quiet, even if it's just for you. Because here's where things get complicated. You've done the work. You've sat with the feeling. You've traced the pattern. You've questioned everything it could mean. And now, the moment comes again. The name appears. Not in your thoughts, but in real life. Maybe on your screen, maybe in conversation, maybe in a place you weren't expecting. This time, you're not caught off guard. You're still present, ready. But now you're standing at the edge of something you hadn't faced before. You could ignore it. You could let it pass, or you could respond. And for a second, everything inside you goes quiet, because you know that whichever way you choose, something in your life is about to shift. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to support this work, feel free to leave a super thanks. It helps more than you know. Thank you for watching.